I had just finished our wedding ceremony when my husband ascended to immortality. He pulled out a chest full of immortal treasures and with a look of impatience, tried to send me away. I fought tooth and nail to cling to him, crying and refusing to accept them, determined to follow him to the heavenly realm, even if it meant death. Forced by circumstance, he finally gave in. Later, in the heavenly realm, I suffered through endless misery, eventually ending up jumping off the cliff of reincarnation, suffering the destruction of both body and soul. In my final moments, Xie Yunji didn't even come to see me once. When I opened my eyes again, I was back on our wedding day. This time, I spoke calmly. I am not going to the immortal realm. You may go. Upon hearing my words, Xie Yunji did not smooth out his furrowed brow. It was as if he thought I was being a little trickster, plotting some new scheme or playing mind games. I looked at Xie Yunji, his black and white immortal robes accentuating his tall frame, his demeanor cold and detached, his expression indifferent. The red robe he had been wearing was one I had stitched needle by needle, spending over half a year to complete. But the moment he was enlightened and ascended, that garment had burst into the scattered pieces, strewn across the floor. It wasn't just his clothes. The wedding bed draped in red silk, the table set with red candles, the door he had repaired just yesterday, the parasol tree in the courtyard, everything was shattered and lay in ruins. Behind Xie Yunji stood many people, all of them immortals from the heavens, with just a slight pressure from the immortals. The living beings on the ground were forced to their knees. Before he could speak, a fairy said airily, "Divine Lord Qingxuan, they say mortal hearts are the most deceitful. Just a moment ago, she was crying and begging you not to leave, and now her attitude has changed in the blink of an eye. Who knows, perhaps the moment we leave, she will sneakily follow us right behind. I recognize her. Her name is Luo Kai. Among all the heavenly fairies who bullied me in my past life, she was the one with the most tricks up her sleeve. Because her sister, the fairy Wu Wang, was secretly in love with Xie Yunji and had been waiting for his return to the celestial realm for centuries. But no one expected that a common mortal like me would be so thick-skinned and so shamelessly persistent as to fly to the heavens and occupy the position of Xie Yunji's wife. In my past life, I really did exactly as she said, secretly following them after they left. As a result, I encountered danger several times, and Xie Yunji had to turn back to save me. The first time he turned back to retrieve me, I asked him with tears in my eyes, "Why are you immortals so cruel? You had to choose our wedding day to grant you ascension. It's just too much." He said nothing, simply lowering his head to tend to my wounds. The second time he turned back to retrieve me, my resolve was even firmer. "We have already vowed to each other in marriage. You are my husband. Wherever you go, I go. I will never leave you, even if I die." Immortals can travel 100 miles in a single stride, and their palaces are incredibly far away, just to find Xie Yunji to pour out my grievances. I walked for 2 whole days. I complained about so much, but in the end, I just opened my mouth to show him the tooth I'd chipped. "You know magic. Can you help me fix this tooth? It looks so ugly with a piece missing. As long as you fix my tooth, that's all I need. The rest of the suffering I will bear on my own." In truth, I couldn't bear it at all, but Xie Yunji wouldn't help me anyway, so my words were in vain. Xie Yunji reached out and gripped my chin, glanced at it, and asked coldly, "Who gave you permission to enter this hall?" I was stunned on the spot. He pulled his hand back. "You are so foolish. Having spent 100 years in the heavens, you still haven't learned even this bit of magic." I felt deeply aggrieved. "I am immortal, and you never taught me." He let out a cold sneer. "So now you realize you're immortal? Back when you were shamelessly insisting on ascending to heaven? Why didn't you remember you were immortal then?" In an instant, I understood everything. So even after 100 years had passed, he still held a grudge against me in his heart. Standing at the edge of the cliff of reincarnation, I had actually known for a long time that the fairy Wu Wang was just deceiving me. She said Xie Yunji was severely wounded fighting demons in the mortal realm, his immortal body hidden away, and that, as his wife, only if I jumped from here could I find him. I thought to myself, perhaps I just didn't want to stay in heaven anymore, nor did I wish to wait for Xie Yunji, so jumping anywhere at all would do. As long as I could leave this godforsaken place, it was enough. I knew in my heart that Xie Yunji was actually in heaven, and he hadn't suffered a single injury. I waited at the edge of the cliff for a long time. If Xie Yunji had come to look at me just once, if he had reached out to stop me, then I wouldn't have jumped. But by the time the fairy finished weaving the last of the sunset, Xie Yunji still never came. No one told me that when a mortal jumps from the cliff of reincarnation, there is no next life. I had once assumed my soul would scatter into nothingness, but the moment I opened my eyes, I had somehow returned to this very day. That is quite nice. This time, Xie Yunji won't have to be put in a difficult position. As for me, I suppose this is a form of release. I gathered my senses, looking at everyone, especially Xie Yunji. If I go back on my word or change my mind, may I be struck dead by heavenly lightning, and never again in this life. Shut up. Xie Yunji interrupted me, his face turning pale. When he was still mortal, he never allowed me to make reckless vows. He said, "What if a deity actually hears you?" Now that he has become a god himself, he understands that the heavens truly exist, and that oaths can indeed be fulfilled. I pondered this and decided not to be so hard on myself. When I died in my past life, I had only lived a few good years in total. In this life, I must live well. So I crouched down and picked up the rare treasures I had knocked to the floor. In my past life, I hadn't looked at these items closely, but now I recognize them well. Clearly, everything Xie Yunji gave me were rare, precious goods. The Jade Dew can extend a mortal's life by several years. The heart-protecting mirror is impervious to blades, fire, and water, and keeps demons and ghosts at bay. The 9-turn soul returning pill can bring the dead back to life and heal all ailments. Any one of these items would be enough to drive mortals to madness, fighting until they were bloodied and broken. I stuffed them all into my robes and looked up at Xie Yunji. Are there any more? His face was livid, his thin lips pressed tight, his hand gripping his sword with a death-like hold. Never mind, this is enough. I am not greedy. So, I waved my hand. You may go now, Xie Yunji. I then turned to the others. You deities can head back as well. I need to tidy up my house. Lokai hugged her sword and scoffed. Mortals are just mortals. Insatiably greedy. Obsessed with wealth. Just a moment ago, you were acting so detached and indifferent, and in less than a moment, your true nature is exposed. Greedy and base. Stupid, foolish, and ignorant of the heights of the heavens. She always scolded me like this. Whenever I argued with her in my past life, Xie Yunji would never take my side. He never once stood up for me. But back when I hadn't ascended yet, he always praised me for being kind and clever, the best girl in the world. Stop thinking about it. Just stop. Let the past be buried. Let dust return to dust. All I want now is to send this living Buddha, Xie Yunji, on his way. But Xie Yunji changed his mind. He politely sent the immortals off, leaving early, saying he would leave later instead. I looked at him. He explained, "I will help you fix up the house." Fine, whatever. This messy room would take me half a day to clean alone. He waved his hand. It'll only take a moment. In the end, he rolled up his sleeves, and without using any immortal magic, he buried himself in the work. I just leaned against the wall, staring at Xie Yunji. So if I hadn't pestered him in my past life, this is how it would have turned out. He would have properly repaired the house and wouldn't have spoken harshly to me. Actually, thinking about it now, when I first arrived at the Heavenly Palace, Xie Yunji treated me quite well. The Yunhua Palace was built entirely of crystal. Even the bed was made of stone. I wasn't used to sleeping on it, so Xie Yunji had someone make a soft bed. I couldn't cultivate immortality, so he brought vegetable seeds from the mortal realm and used immortal water to grow a patch in the courtyard. I still don't understand how we ended up at the point of wishing each other dead. Xie Yunji was strong, and without using magic, he restored the house quickly. His clean, white clothes were stained with a bit of dust. And in an instant, it felt like things were back to the way they were. Xie Yunji and I were both orphans, raised with the help of the neighbors. This house was something we built after saving money for several years to get married. The day the new house was finished, I touched every corner of it. I was filled with joy from head to toe. Right here in the middle of this room, Xie Yunji picked me up and spun me around several times. I leaned on his shoulder, giggling. He promised me, "In the future, I will definitely build you a courtyard 10 times larger than this one." I urged him, "It's all tidied up now. You really can go." Xie Yunji didn't move. His brows furrowed again. He stepped closer, grabbed my wrist, and tapped his fingertip against my forehead. Instantly, a surge of warmth flowed through my entire body, as if he were probing for something. After a long while, Xie Yunji withdrew his hand. He finally asked the question, lingering in his heart. "Why have you suddenly decided you don't want to go to the heavens?" Seeing that he hadn't discovered anything, I breathed a sigh of relief. Why must there be so many reasons? I looked at him with a calm expression. "Since it is destined that you and I have no marital fate, I naturally dare not force it. I am but a mortal. How could I dare to defy the heavens?" I thought Xie Yunji would be satisfied with my sensibility, but he didn't look happy. As he was leaving, he looked back once more. "As you wish. Once I leave, I may not return for thousands or tens of thousands of years. Just don't regret it. Why would it take thousands or tens of thousands of years? A day in heaven is a year on earth. Perhaps by the time he thinks of me again, I will have already turned to dust." I watched him from afar and raised my hands in a bow. I wish you a smooth journey ahead, Divine Lord, and eternal prosperity. I wish you a future free of burdens and a safe journey. It's just that everything else no longer has anything to do with me. Xie Yunji stood upon the clouds, looking down at the girl in red in the courtyard. Her farewell was so open and devoid of attachment, as if the past 18 years had vanished like clouds and mist. Losai reminded him repeatedly that he must erase her memories. Otherwise, there was no guarantee she wouldn't regret it later and find some way to ascend to the heavens to demand a title from me. But as his fingertips touched her forehead, at the very moment his immortal power was about to disperse, Xie Yunji suddenly stopped. A strange heaviness filled his heart. In the end, he hesitated. Fine. He would leave her with a sliver of her old memories, if she is truly that stubborn and overcomes every hardship to find me. I may not be unable to make an exception for her, knowing her temperament. Not to mention, she has no one else in this world to rely on. She is most afraid of being alone. Xie Yunji knows this best. I fear that in just a few days, she will suddenly wake up and regret her decision. Forget it. If she truly humbles herself to beg, he will find another place, purchase a residence, so that no one will know when he descends to the mortal realm. After Xie Yunji left, my house returned to its quiet state. Poor Miss Xiao. Married for such a short time, and her husband has already passed away. Your husband truly had no luck. Others would say, Miss Xiao is so beautiful, and she built such a large house. She is truly capable. Are you looking for a husband to move in? My son is willing to marry into your family. That was when I realized Xie Yunji had altered everyone's memories before he left. In the eyes of the folks in Xiangyun village, Xie Yunji and I had been married for 2 years when he fell gravely ill and died. I became the youngest widow in these 10 miles and 8 villages. What is the meaning of this? In my previous life, he simply wiped the villagers' memories. Though the market for second marriages is decent, but a reputation for being a widow isn't as good as being a first-time bride. I was so angry I could chew nails. Who would want to be a widow at such a young age? A few days later, plenty of people in the village rushed over, all trying to set me up with someone. Every one of them used Xie Yunji as the benchmark in their memories. My late husband was handsome, well-read, and skilled with a blade. He was even better looking than the top scholars in the capital. I turned away one person after another, and eventually, I just locked the front gate. That was until Sister Niu brought someone over. I looked up, and my eyes lit up. Honestly, in my past life, both in heaven and on earth, I had seen countless gods and mortals. Xie Yunji was the best-looking person I had ever seen. But this man before me was even more handsome than him. I stared dumbstruck, but a moment later, I shuddered and came to my senses. In the past, it was because I was greedy for Xie Yunji's looks that I suffered so much. He used to study with the village teacher. His hands were meant for holding a brush. I felt bad for him and rarely let him do any heavy lifting. Originally, after we were married, he was supposed to go to the capital for the imperial exams. Xie Yunji even said, once I become a top scholar, I will certainly earn you a noble title. I still have such a long life ahead of me. I can't truly remain a widow for Xie Yunji. I fear loneliness more than anything. So finding a good man to continue living a good life is not something I'm against, but I've gotten smarter now. If I'm going to find a man, he needs to be steady and hardworking. Those who are vain, pretentious, or overly scholarly might not have the best intentions. I pulled Sister Niu aside and asked with some concern, I need a man who can do manual labor. Can his looks and build handle that? Sister Niu had a sudden realization. That goes without saying. Look at his nose. It is high, straight, and well-defined. His bridge of the nose is high and dignified. I've also taken a look at his hands. The knuckles are well-defined, long, slender, and strong. Sister-in-law has a good eye for people. A man with such bearing and character is a top-tier match in both conduct and appearance. I felt incredibly embarrassed. Sister-in-law, I only let you in because I know you're reliable. I stole a glance at the man. He was wearing white robes, standing in the courtyard, looking neat and clean. Seeing me look over, he flashed a smile, with 2 tiny dimples at the corners of his mouth, and gave me a proper respectful bow. Sister-in-law Niu left with a smile, leaving Li Yanci and me staring at each other. I secretly cheered myself on. Why are you still so obsessed with looks? Didn't you agree to look past the surface and see the substance? I took another look at him. The man's gaze was alluring, carrying a hint of lazy, half-smiling charm. His black hair was tied back loosely, and his eyes were so captivating, I couldn't look away. Well, this is indeed a bit hard to ignore. Oh well, I have experience now. If this man doesn't behave, I have plenty of ways to keep him in line. Li Yanci is much more sensible than Xie Yunji. It is just that his style is a bit bold. After locking the courtyard gate, he pressed up against me. Chow, are you cold? Do you need someone to warm you up? Based on my experience, he was definitely trying to flirt with me right now. It is just that he seemed quite inexperienced. His words were casual, but his ears were already bright red. His fingers were clutching his sleeves, and his eyes were darting around, not daring to meet mine. One look and you could tell it was his first time doing this. He was very clumsy. I sighed and pulled his clothes back into place for him, covering up a large patch of skin. Be careful not to catch a cold. Since I agreed to let you stay, I won't kick you out. I earnestly advised him. You don't need to sell your looks to get a meal. Whatever that brothel madam taught you, just forget it all, since you've escaped from that pit of fire. From today on, we'll start over with a clean slate. Li Yanci looked completely bewildered. He stopped pulling at his clothes. I don't have a mother. I understood he was too embarrassed to say it. There is a place in Bluebird Town called the Pleasure Pavilion, which secretly provides male companions to wealthy ladies in the capital. The madams there are the ones who teach the young men like that. I've seen it before. That is how they seduce their patrons. Li Yanci faced the corner of the wall, sulking for a long time. I shook my head. How long can you rely on your looks to get by? I hope he realizes this truth soon. Tomorrow, you're picking up a shovel and getting to work. After a busy day, I tidied up a room for him and collapsed into bed. As soon as Li Yanci bolted the door, a puff of white mist drifted out. A boy in red who looked 80% like him appeared and eagerly scurried over. Li Qingya asked hurriedly, "Brother, did you get the Soul-Condensing Pearl?" Li Yanci stopped in his tracks, looking at the moonlight. "Qingya, has anyone ever asked you, are you cold?" Li Qingya was stunned for a moment. "What is wrong with you?" Li Yanci regained his composure and said seriously, "Miss Xiao is a good person. It is wrong to cheat her. Let's go look somewhere else. So what if we fail?" "Brother, why are you making excuses? She is just a farm woman. Just watch me. Once I get the Soul-Condensing bead tonight, we'll leave this place." With those words spoken, he turned and ran off. Li Yanci didn't have time to catch him. While I was sleeping in a daze, a force lifted me up from the bed. I opened my eyes and saw Li Yanci. He wasn't as cold and distant as he was during the day, dressed in a fiery red outfit. His gaze was captivating, dazzling to the eyes. I felt as if I were bewitched, my eyes fixed intently on him, my body refusing to obey me. Li Yanci leaned in closer, his voice carrying a seductive tone. "Chow, did you save a fox on the snowy mountain years ago?" I tilted my head to look at him, puzzled for a long moment. "Are you that fox?" He froze, not saying a word, his hands continuing their movements, leaving me dizzy and confused. Chow, his low, raspy voice continued to tempt me. "Where did you put the Soul-Condensing bead Xie Yunji gave you? Will you give it to me? Where is it hidden? Tell me you'll give it to me. Just say you'll give it to me." I curled my lip. How annoying. How exhausting. Whenever Xie Yunji used to annoy me like this, I would seal his lips shut. As soon as the thought crossed my mind, I reached up and grabbed Li Yanci by the neck, leaning in without a second thought, and kissed him hard on the lips. The light around us dimmed instantly. His entire body stiffened, and his already beautiful eyes suddenly widened, his earlobes turning bright red instantly. The next second, as if he had been burned by fire, he suddenly scrambled up and hid under the bed. As the vision faded, just as I was about to fall from the air, a force caught me again, hurriedly and clumsily placed me gently on the bed. I rolled over and fell right back into a deep sleep. Li Qingya leaned against the corner of the wall, his entire body struck as if by lightning. Before he could even recover his senses, Li Yanci crawled out. "Well, did she say where the pearl is?" Li Qingya was exasperated. "I didn't hear it." He gritted his teeth and said, "That Chow is truly formidable." With just a slight movement of her lips, I was rendered completely unable to move. If she had decided to strike at me, I fear I would have died by her hand. Li Yanci looked utterly bewildered. "Did she scold you?" Li Qingya didn't answer, rubbing his chest. "Brother, I suspect she knows some soul-stealing sorcery. Otherwise, why would my heart be beating as if it were about to burst out? As if it wanted to offer itself up to Chow. Li Yanci had a sudden realization. No wonder they say that to bring her to the heavenly court. Xie Yunji was willing to endure 81 heavenly thunderbolts. This Chow is certainly not to be underestimated. So, what should we do now? Li Yanci pondered. It's not just that pearl in this world that can preserve a soul. It's just that they are afraid of the trouble. As it happens, someone in the heavens suddenly spread the word, claiming that Xie Yunji's late mortal wife possessed many treasures, including this very pearl. They were afraid of the hassle of scheming, so they decided to just take it from her, to avoid having to run around elsewhere. That is why, along this journey, the demons and monsters who came to find Xiao Qiao to snatch the treasure have all been driven away by the two of them. Li Qingya was dazed. Why don't you go and wear her down for a few days? Wait until I go back and practice that dark art. It must be that my skills aren't refined enough. Brother, wait for me a few days. I can definitely do it. Li Yanci thought for a moment and agreed, fine. Before leaving, Li Qingya looked back. She is very wicked. If he tries to bite you, you must dodge it. Finally, he turned back again, and don't let him touch you either. If she touches you, you must also step aside. Li Yanci pondered this for a moment and reluctantly nodded his head. When I opened my eyes the next day, the scent of a meal wafted over. I pushed open the door to look, and not only was the courtyard swept clean, but the chickens and ducks were also well fed. I shook Li Yanci's hand, smiling brightly. Sister-in-law, Anu was right. You really are very capable. He bit his lip, and for a split second, he seemed to want to pull his hand away, but in the end, he gave up. I took a closer look, and his attire was no longer exposing his arms and legs like before. He looked proper and decent now, as if he had turned over a new leaf and decided to behave. I led Li Yanci out of the house and bought him a set of cotton clothes. In this bitter, freezing winter, wearing only a thin, single-layered garment would just lead to illness and wasted money. I gestured with my hands, and my hands couldn't help but brush against his waist, lifting the loose clothing. The waist beneath my hands was firm and strong. His chest was hard, his arms were thick, and his features were handsome. I sighed and shook my head. Well, I truly have been blessed in this life. For the first 18 years, I was lovey-dovey and sweet with a cold, heartless deity, and for the rest of my life, I have such a top-tier man to keep me warm. After noting his size, I looked up, and Li Yanci's fair face had turned bright red. His ears were burning crimson, and even his neck was flushed a soft pink. He turned his face away. His eyelashes drooped, hiding his eyes. His throat moved slightly, betraying his nervousness. He seemed quite awkward at times. I leaned in close to him, chatting about our future life together. Once we pick an auspicious day and buy a few yards of red cloth, we'll tie the knot. Once that is done, you'll officially be part of the family. From then on, you'll be my husband, and I'll be your wife. We'll live a good life together. He froze for a moment, looking quite startled. Tie the knot. Seeing his reaction, I took a step back and said cheerfully, that is right. If you don't want to, I'll have Sister Niyu introduce me to some other young men when I get home. I never force anyone. I didn't nod. He pondered for a moment, his words coming out in stammers. If you find another man, will you touch him like this too? He grabbed my hand and pressed it against his chest. The veins in his hands stood out as he held his breath tightly. Yes. I gave him a playful pinch while I was at it. I watched with satisfaction as he gritted his teeth. And it's not just that. There are plenty of other things a married couple can do. Li Yanci didn't understand what I was calculating. Sweat beading on his forehead, he lowered his head and said, you mustn't find another man. I'll be yours then. He thought of Li Qingya. He saw a Qiao as a plague. If I were to marry a Qiao, would Qingya even be willing to call a Qiao sister-in-law? By nightfall, while I was drifting in and out of sleep, I saw Li Yanci again. These past few days, he'd been hanging around Sister Niu and the others, learning everything there is to know about the affairs of a married couple. Sister Niu had scared him. A man's purity is of the utmost importance. You must understand that apart from your wife, no other woman is even allowed to touch you. Otherwise, you'll be thrown into the river. During the day, he let me touch him however I pleased, without uttering a single word. He just held it all in. But at night, he'd dress himself up to seduce me. Though he kept muttering about some bead or other, I found it incredibly annoying. I grabbed him, flipped him over, and pinned him down. I leaned in and nibbled on his soft lips, what we didn't finish during the day. Do you want to continue tonight? His eyes widened in shock. You're this intimate even in broad daylight. Li Qingya had been practicing dark arts for days, but there hadn't been any progress. He took a trip to the mortal realm to wander around, and after a few days of pondering, he finally understood. It turned out that what happened that day wasn't some soul eating dark art at all. Mortals say that only married couples do those kinds of things. For someone like him, without a name or status, he'd be drowned at the bottom of a river. I tore open his clothes and slid my hand inside to rub against him. We were so intimate before. And like this now. You clearly want this just as much as I do. His whole body went rigid. Just as he raised his arms to hold me, a surge of force struck us. The next second, I fell into a cold embrace, rolling aside. I just fell fast asleep in his arms. Li Yanci stared at the bed, his face pale with rage, choking out the words. What are you doing? Li Qingya, have you no shame? I have no shame. And you think you're so righteous? Don't take me for a fool. Kissing, hugging, and sleeping together. Those are things only a married couple does. You're just like me, with no name or status. What right do you have to scold me? Li Yanci was left speechless, only clutching the person in his arms tighter. Qingya, mortals live for 100 years at most. Our avatars can last for over 200 years. The matter of the soul, condensing bead is not urgent. If you really can't wait, then go find the soul grass yourself. Anyway, just act like the soul-condensing pearl doesn't exist. If you happen to find the spirit rhyme immortal herb, you may keep it for yourself. There is no need to consider me. Furthermore, you have no heart for intimacy with a Chow, so you need not force yourself from now on. Circulate your spiritual power and cast your spells. If after 100 years you still haven't found the immortal herb, I will naturally step in to help. Li Qingya jumped up. His eyes glared fixedly at him. Have you lost your mind? You want to stay in the mortal realm just because of him? You're even neglecting your cultivation, aside from knowing how to kiss. What other magic does he have that has completely hooked your heart away? He lunged forward, trying to snatch the person in his arms. I just don't believe it. I must see for myself what kind of trick he has up his sleeve. Li Yanci pushed him away. That is enough. Control yourself. Li Qingya calmed down a little. He leaned in, grabbed his hand, and flipped it over. The sky is falling. Where is your cinnabar mark? Where did it go? You gave it to him. You actually gave it to him. Li Yanci recalled the outrageous events of the day. His ears turned red. His whole body felt prickly. Li Qingya stomped his feet. A fox like you would be drowned at the bottom of a river. How dare you scold me? Shameless, you say? You're the one who's shameless. You've even sacrificed your purity. I'm the one with shame. I've only sacrificed a kiss so far. We share our fortunes together. Wherever you are, I am there too. What's yours is also mine. I will absolutely not leave. After finishing, he glanced over. Then he turned and ran off. When I got up the next morning, Li Yanci was not in the house. I looked at the clean and tidy room. I remembered I told him to get up early yesterday and go to town to pick up the goods we bought. After finishing my meal, I took out some fabric, measuring it out to make a few outfits. One in red, one in white. I also needed to sew a couple of bags. Just as I sat down, the front door was blown open by a light breeze. I looked up into the light and saw Xie Yunji, whom I hadn't seen in ages. He stood outside the door, gripping his sword, scanning the courtyard, not seeing anything strange. Then he stared at me. I never expected that after ascending to heaven, he would run back to this rundown little village. After all, in my past life, I asked him if he ever had any spare time. Could he come visit Xiangyan village to see how the old neighbors were doing? Back then, he just gave me a look, dismissing it by saying, how could a celestial being interact with mortals again? It would be beneath his dignity and status. He completely forgot the auntie who made him shoe soles, the uncle who would sneak rice into our bin in the middle of the night, and all the many other villagers who had helped us in the past. Ever since Xie Yunji ascended to heaven, he'd been running around everywhere, in the dangerous realms of the three worlds, never once intentionally looking back. He only occasionally glanced at the communication talisman on his waist, that specially made communication talisman, never even thinking about it. He stepped closer and sat down at the table just like he used to, struggling for a long time before speaking. I pleaded with my father, and he has agreed. If you are still willing, I can take you back to the heavenly realm right now. I paused for a moment, then chuckled. Back to the heavenly realm, and then sleep in a freezing cold room like before, and spend my days waiting by the threshold. My current husband is obedient and sensible. He handles all the chores perfectly during the day, and at night, he works hard to keep me warm and entertained. I'm not blind. Why would I give up such a sweet life to go up to the heavens? I wasn't even born yet. He paused for a moment. It is just that I have to take over the family legacy, and if I am to take a wife, she must be of the immortal clan. Even though you would be a concubine, I wouldn't play favorites. My heart would only belong to you. I put down my needlework and shook my head. I'm not going. I'm perfectly fine here. He grew a bit angry. Mortals live for 100 years at most, no better than ants. Up in the heavens, you could live as long as the gods, enjoying endless glory. Why be so stubborn? If only I could. I really wanted to tell Xie Yunji. I've wandered through that wonderful heaven you speak of. And let me tell you, I had a miserable time there. I just lowered my head and said, even now, you still look down on me. thinking I'm someone so shallow. If I were after your petty luxuries, I never would have married you in the first place. Xie Yunji's face turned ashen, just as he was about to nag some more. The communication talisman in his hand urged him. Divine Lord, a bone demon has appeared north of the city. Please, Divine Lord, come quickly. He still didn't believe me. He just left the item behind. I'll give you 3 more days. If you've made up your mind, crush this talisman. I will return. After Li Yanci entered the house, he brought the goods inside all by himself. He rolled up his sleeves, his fair arms showing faint veins from the exertion. Once inside, he suddenly froze. He stretched his neck and sniffed the air. Simona's been here. A fierce glint flashed in his eyes. His voice was low. I didn't hide it from him. The husband who was supposed to be dead has come back to haunt us. Crash. The goods were smashed all over the floor. Li Yanci stood in the middle of the room, biting his lip and keeping his head down in silence. What is the matter? I walked over, stood on tiptoe, and nibbled his cheek. I'm hungry. Let's make dinner. Li Yanci collected his thoughts and scrambled to tidy up the goods. Right, I'll go now. By the middle of the night, Li Yanci climbed up on tiptoe and sat on the wall, looking utterly dejected. Li Qingya rushed over in a hurry. You said Xie Yunji is back. Li Yanci tugged at his sleeve. Keep your voice down. The official husband has shown up again, and we have no standing. Does it sound good for us to be like this? Mortals always say foxes are naturally flirtatious and prone to debauchery, but their azure fox lineage is famous for being loyal and conservative. If you look at it from the fox clan's perspective, he and Li Qingya are only a little over 100 years old. They haven't even grown up yet. If the clan leader found out that the first time they left the mountain, they ended up being someone's side piece, he'd probably break their foxtails. What kind of damn husband is he? Zhao stopped wanting him a long time ago. What right does he have to any standing? Li Qingya refused to acknowledge it. His brother is first in line, and he is happy being second. If Xie Yunji is added to the mix, wouldn't he be pushed to third? That won't do. My brother's enemy is my ally. He instigated that Xie Yunji is a petty man with a lot of schemes. And he has 18 years of history with Xiao Chao. Neither of us is very bright, but together we might be enough. Let's shake hands and make peace for now. Form an alliance to deal with our common enemy. How about it? Li Yanci nodded. He decided to listen to his brother. He had already embarked on a desperate path. Neither like a fox, nor like a lover. There was no turning back now. I noticed Li Yanci acting strangely. He had reverted to his old ways. He wouldn't even wear his clothes properly, and he wouldn't speak properly either. I demanded to know what he was up to. Planning to go back to your old tricks? He scratched his scalp, looking completely aggrieved. You don't like it this way? Acting out in broad daylight, and you think you're in the right. I shouldered my bamboo basket and told him to hurry up and follow. At this time of year, the herbs in the mountains are perfect for picking. In the past, to save a few extra coins, I used to carry Xie Yunji deep into the mountain hollows to dig. Now, I cherish my life more. So I just went near a cave. Li Yanci walked in front and took my hand. I told you I could go dig them myself. You should just stay home. You don't need to do any work. I can do any kind of work. Just as he finished speaking, a flash of sword light struck down. In that life or death moment, Li Yanci shielded me behind him, blocking the sword light with his bare hands. Achao! A familiar voice rang out. I saw Xie Yunji. You refused to return to the heavenly realm. Could it be just to mingle with a lowly fox like this? The light faded. He looked at me with a dark expression. Do you realize that the man before you is a demon? He only approaches you because of the treasures I gave you. Do you really think he loves you? You've been completely deceived. I don't even know why you're still like this. Planning to call me stupid again, are you? I pressed my hand against Li Yanci's palm and looked Xie Yunji straight in the eye. Those things are mine. If he wants to take them, I am happy to give them all to him. This isn't deception at all. And even if it were, from beginning to end, he hasn't harmed a single hair on my head. Yet you, who never lied to me, have hurt me far more than anyone else. Xie Yunji channeled his magic into his blade and swung it down, gritting his teeth. You filthy fox. The hatred of stealing a wife. We cannot coexist. Li Yanci could no longer maintain his human form. 9 foxtails suddenly burst from his body. He slammed his palms into the muddy ground, letting out a loud roar. Qingya pulled him to run. A ball of crimson light soared out from the green mist. He desperately took half the blow for him. Then, he bit down, hoisted me onto his back, and bolted toward the edge of the forest like a madman. I looked back. Li Yanci had fully transformed into a fox, viciously blocking Xie Yunji's path. The red fox slowly set me down by the water's edge, lying down half a foot away to watch me. He wouldn't shift back into human form. I looked at him. "What is your name?" "Li Qingya." He scraped at the mud with his paw. After a long while, he gave a very subtle nod. "I'm sorry." His voice was very low. "My older brother and I didn't mean to deceive you. I'm not stupid." Li Yanci is sometimes very obedient, working very hard at his chores, thoughtful and considerate in every way. But sometimes he seems like a different person, sweet-talking and acting coy, with a temper that flares at the slightest provocation, like a feisty little firecracker. How can one person have two faces? The difference is so vast. How could I not notice? When it comes down to it, the soul bead they're looking for isn't in my pocket either. These are two little fox demons, identical twins. They don't know the ways of the world, silly and pure. Dumb as a post. One serves me faithfully all day long, while the other spends the night racking his brains to dress up, trying to seduce me, and I enjoy it. So I'm too lazy to point it out. Seeing I didn't say a word, the red fox whispered again. "My brother is very skilled. He only lost to Xie Yunji because he had been severely beaten." I waited in the house until nightfall before Li Yanci finally came home, but the one who returned was a snow white fox demon. It stood hesitantly at the front door, its fluffy tail hanging low. Looking completely dejected, behind it followed a fire red fox demon with its tail drooping just the same. When I finished tidying the room and planned to go to sleep, the two fox demons, one standing and one lying down, were still blocking the doorway. I sat on the edge of the bed, pulled back the quilt, and patted it. "Come on up." The red fox's ears perked up, and it quickly hopped onto the bed. The snow fox gently lifted a paw and unhurriedly slinked over to the bedside. With a push of its front paws, it made a graceful leap up. They couldn't turn back into human form for the time being. These two fox demons were about the size of cats now. I held one in my left arm and one in my right, as if I were hugging two fluffy fox furs. It was incredibly comfortable. My God, they're so funny. They're so cute I could just crush them. What is wrong with me? I couldn't hold it in and hugged the snow fox, taking a deep, forceful sniff. The snow fox shyly lowered its ears and lay there obediently. The red fox, unhappy, made faces at him. I took a deep breath to the left as well. The two little things finally settled down. For a while after that, Xie Yunji never showed his face again. I kept the two fox demons and lived a peaceful life. When Li Yanci was in human form, he would tidy up the house himself. When in fox form, he'd use magic if he couldn't manage. He kept the place spotless every single day. He took care of all the meals and laundry. Now, looking at Li Qingya, he would stay in bed as long as I did. When he was hungry, he'd just wink at his brother. The poor snow fox would sometimes lose his patience and tap the fire fox on the forehead. He'd let out a cry and roll into my arms. My heart would just melt. After a few days, I was heading back from the street, and before I could even step inside, a ball of fiery red shadow crashed into me. He wrapped his arms around me completely. "Ciao." The boy hugged me affectionately. "I can finally hold you again. I've been so miserable." I pulled myself out of Li Qingya's embrace, stepped back, and finally got a good look at his face. The brothers looked very much alike, but Li Yanci's features were more aloof. Li Qingya had expressive, almond-shaped eyes and looked even more charming when he smiled. I turned my head to look behind him. Li Yanci was guarding the front door. Seeing me glance over, he walked over. He reached out to push Li Qingya aside and took the things I was carrying. "Are you tired? For lunch, I made your favorite braised meatballs, sautéed fish fillets, and sweet lotus root with osmanthus. I'll take those goods to town to sell tomorrow morning." He tossed the package to Li Qingya and grabbed a towel to wipe my hands. Li Qingya chased after him, making a fuss. "You're not the only one who can do these chores. I can do them too." With one on my left and one on my right, I had company. To be honest, I could stay calm dealing with two fox demons, but facing two human men, I'm still not quite used to it. Am I, Xiao really about to experience life with two husbands? I certainly have a lot of nerve. It seems that after dying once, Qiao, your husband, he is actually alive. He said he fell off a cliff halfway. And thanks to some kind souls helping him, he managed to find his way back and is still alive. I stared at him. Xie Yunji, who was beside me, dressed in common clothes, looked at me with eyes full of anticipation. Li Yanci's expression was cold. He emerged from behind me. Sister-in-law Nu was stunned. She stammered. There's another one here? Then we'll just go by order of arrival. The one who came later can just take the smaller seat. Li Qingya wasn't there. Otherwise, he surely would have shouted, "This is outrageous," fearing he might spout more nonsense. I pulled Xie Yunji away, telling him to leave. "What are you doing?" I looked at him. "What are you planning to do?" "I want to go home." He kept his mouth shut. Achiao, it's only because I wasn't here that you were bewitched by those demons. Fox demons are masters at deceiving hearts. You don't love them at all. You've just been led astray. I think he's the one who's been led astray. He doesn't want to be a noble deity, but insists on pestering me relentlessly. Xie Yunji acted as if he were in his own home. The two brothers are exactly the same. Once they fall in love with someone, they are willing to give their whole lives to them. I curled my fingers and gripped Li Yanci's palm tightly. He bit his lip and with burning ears leaned in a little closer. Xie Yunji's appearance. The two brothers were exceptionally uneasy. Li Yanci was reserved and kept to himself. He usually showed it by finishing his chores and then grieving in solitude, silently swallowing his bitterness. Whenever I asked him, he would just shake his head obediently and bury his face in my chest. It's all right. As long as a Chow is happy, that's all that matters. Li Qingya had a fiery temper. He would spend his days outside Xie Yunji's room, making snide remarks. Some people's skin is truly thick enough to reach the heavens and make a name for itself. When you ascended, you looked down on your former wife. Now that she's living a good life, you've searched the 4 seas and 8 wildernesses with a lantern, only to realize you can't find a wife as good as her anymore. So you shamelessly come crawling back to beg her. Ungrateful and treacherous. And you call yourself a high god? Xie Yunji inside the room did not respond. After a long while, the sound of a heavy object hitting the floor echoed out. He opened the door, his expression calm. A Chow and I never formally divorced. As long as I am not dead, I remain her rightful husband. You two took advantage of the situation, and yet you dare to be so arrogant. Li Yanci's expression darkened, clutching my hand tightly. Li Qingya bared his teeth, then go die. With that, he reached out to strike at Xie Yunji's vital point. The 3 of them looked ready to tear the house down. I spoke up at the right moment. Enough. Instantly, the courtyard fell silent. I didn't say another word and turned to walk into the house. The door slammed shut. When night fell, the 2 foxes, one standing and one lying down, guarded the doorway once again. They both knew I feel happy when I touch something furry. So, whenever I am upset, they automatically shift back into their true forms. But this time, I locked them inside the room, forbidding them from coming out. Xie Yunji followed behind me, shadowing my every step. Have you thought it over? Are you ready to return to the immortal realm with me? I've spent these past few days jealous of those 2 beasts. If you continue to punish me, I suppose my anger should have faded by now. Didn't you used to care for me the most? I cut him off. Mortals are lowly. Fox demons are beasts, and you are the high god who saves the world. In your eyes, when will you ever realize that all beings are equal? I continued to ask. If I go back this time, will I still be living in the Yunhua Palace? He replied instinctively, this time, you will live with me in the Shangyang Palace. As the words left his lips, his face turned deathly pale. After a long silence, he said, Wu Wang, who tricked you into jumping off the reincarnation cliff? I have already demoted him to immortal. Those immortals who bullied you, I have punished them all. It is my fault, but what about you? I asked him. Among those who bullied me, wasn't there also you, Xie Yunji? He did not answer, so I asked him, is immortal Wu Wang still in the immortal realm, governing the stars? In this lifetime, he has not committed those acts that harmed you. I have no reason to demote him arbitrarily. I smiled. I didn't know what to say. I just felt a lingering sadness. Those unbearable days and nights, the century of being humiliated, I still have nightmares about it to this day. So, everything I have endured, is it just going to be dismissed like this? I blinked my eyes, swallowing the bitterness. May I ask you one question? He panicked, desperate to seize any chance at restoration. Ask. Under the moonlight, I asked him, word by word. You have boundless magic, great supernatural powers. You subdue demons and monsters. You are omnipotent. But why? Back then, were you unwilling to fix that tooth for me? The day I returned from his palace, everyone laughed at me, calling me a freak. For a century, in the immortal realm, I was always sad. When I was sad, I would laugh loudly at the mirror, telling myself everything would get better. But after that day, I kept my mouth tightly shut, never daring to laugh out loud again. To this day, I have never let it go. I have been trapped in that moment. Back then, I was easy to coax. If he had just lifted a finger to fix that tooth for me, perhaps no matter how bitter or difficult it was, I would still be sitting stubbornly on the threshold, waiting for him. Xie Yunji gritted his teeth, his jawline pulled tight, his whole body trembling. I'm sorry. It was He had intended to give her the cold shoulder for a few days, so she wouldn't cause any more trouble. or stir up any more drama. He only meant to wait a few days, and while she was asleep, fix her tooth for her. She would surely be surprised when she woke up and spin around with joy. But before he could do it, he heard she had jumped off the reincarnation cliff. I waved my hand. There is nothing left to say. You should leave. If you don't leave now, my 2 husbands will never be at ease. I don't want to make them sad. Xie Yunji tried to follow me, and I stopped in my tracks. Without looking back, I tossed out a remark. Are you staying behind to help them through their postpartum recovery? The sound of footsteps faded away, and Xie Yunji could no longer hold himself up. A mouthful of fresh blood surged forth. It had taken him hundreds of years to gather the shattered soul of a Chao, using half of his own divine spirit to reassemble it, and then traversing the heavens and the earth to send him into the cycle of rebirth. Heavenly lightning struck his body again and again, each strike a form of punishment, each strike a manifestation of his longing. Heaven was unjust to him, choosing exactly the moment he had given up again, after someone else had taken advantage of the situation by his side, to finally show mercy and force him to remember all the past lives. He was so unwilling to accept it, so full of resentment. An immortal's lifespan is infinite and endless, with a future that stretches on without end. How was he to endure the remaining bottomless nights? He stayed by my side, never leaving an inch. Through the 10 months of pregnancy, until I gave birth to our daughter, Xiaohuan. The beauty of the path. The moments, the harmony and peace. The third time, Xie Yunji was truly at his wit's end and forced a clarity pill into my mouth. It was something prepared specifically for mortals going to the heavens. Without this medicine, a mortal in the heavens would feel as if they were in a sea of fire. I followed Xie Yunji back, feeling perfectly content, to that Yunhua palace, which had become a stain on the reputation of the god of Qingshuan. In the long, drawn-out years that followed, I spent all my time waiting for him, hoping that when he was in a good mood, he would show kindness and stay in my room for a night, hoping that when he returned from his travels, he would pass by the gate and look at me. Back then, after we had been together, Xie Yunji would always look coldly at the aura around me, a flash of indifference in his eyes. I understood that he resented me in his heart for ruining his cultivation and dragging him into breaking his vows. If not for my persistent pestering back then, he would never have had to share a bed with a lowly mortal after achieving godhood. Slowly, his visits became less frequent. I would often sit on the threshold, waiting for him, but I could never seem to wait him out. I kept waiting, until the grass swaying in the wind outside the gate gained consciousness, until the newly bloomed peach blossoms took on human form, and still he never came. Xie Yunji, the grandmother who made tofu in Xiangyun village, was very kind to me, and the delivery boy took care of me too. They always cheerfully called me Miss Xiao. But in the heavenly realm, once everyone realized Xie Yunji didn't love me, they started to bully me. She is truly shameless. God Qingshuan is so high and mighty, yet a lowly mortal like her dares to daydream, clinging to him and refusing to let go. Exactly. If you ask me, the god should have just killed his wife to attain godhood. Such a great opportunity, completely wasted. But it is strange when you think about it. She is just an ordinary mortal. The god has thousands of ways to get rid of her if he really wanted to. Yet, he just can't seem to shake her off. Does she really have some secret trick to seduce men? They would deliberately conjure fierce ghosts to tease me. They would turn stones into my meals. Caught off guard, I would take a hard bite, filling my mouth with blood. I was often so frightened by these spells that I would hide under my covers. I didn't dare to eat. I didn't dare to sleep, because even in my dreams, monsters would appear. I thought Xie Yunji was kept in the dark, so I went to his main hall to complain. I truly had nothing left to fear. I naturally began to feel at ease. The two fox demons worked together to handle everything, such as the matter of sleeping together, When Li Qingya first kept me company, he kept me up all night in agony. When I woke up in the middle of the night, I saw Li Yanci holding a basin, clutching a towel, gently and carefully cleaning me up. I pinched his finger. He bowed his head and kissed it. Li Yanci is always very submissive. Even during those times in the room, he became perceptive and sharp after our first time together, extremely adept at accommodating me. Every time, he manages to make my spirit sway, as if I were sinking into soft clouds. Li Qingya has a fiery temper, and he is even more impulsive when we are alone. But he is also quite thoughtful. Sometimes he would intentionally let his 2 fox ears show. When I couldn't handle his teasing, I would reach out and tug on those ears. He would let out an ouch in response. "Ah, Chow, be gentle. It's very ticklish." Ignoring his brother's rule of no more than 3 times a night, he would find another excuse to start messing around again. And so, the time just slipped away. The villagers all complimented me on my good fortune. And then that day, Sister Niu brought another man to my house. She was beaming with joy. "Ah, Chow, your husband, he's actually alive." Xie Yunji acted as if he were in his own home. Walking straight inside, Li Yanci walked in behind him, glaring at him with a dark expression. I waited a moment before going out to look. The 2 of them suddenly started bickering. Li Yanci wasn't as smooth with his words as he was. Xie Yunji recounted everything from how we first met to the process of us falling in love. Every detail left Li Yanci unable to get a word in. Li Yanci turned to look for me, leaning pitifully against my shoulder. Xie Yunji's expression was ugly. His fists clenched tight, suppressing the urge to slay the demon. Not long after, Li Qingya came home. He doesn't hold back when he fights. With a wave of his arm, he marched into Xie Yunji's room to start a brawl. He focused specifically on Xie Yunji's shortcomings, stepping on his sore spots, like helping me earn money, helping me tidy up the house, or working in the fields. But because he himself didn't do any of those things, he would shout, "What can my brother even do? What can my brother even do?" Xie Yunji retorted calmly, insisting he could do all those things just as well. Li Qingya lost his temper, shouting, "My brother and I can stay by Xiao Chao's side for a lifetime. Can you?" Xie Yunji's expression stiffened, as if he'd been struck by lightning. I held my forehead, unable to watch him spout nonsense all day long. He wasn't actually lying. Our Azure Fox lineage possesses a unique skill. When our kin form a bond, the male can take on the burden of the life pulse. The elders of our clan doted on their wives deeply, so the younger generations were almost always carried by them. The 2 brothers were incredibly hardworking and diligent, yet there had been no signs on my end at all. I had assumed it was because of our different species. Turns out, I wasn't the one meant to carry the pulse after all. Li Yanci asked shyly, "A Chow, do you prefer a son or a daughter?" At that moment, I sighed like a weary man and uttered that classic line, "As long as it is carried by you, I'll love them, regardless of whether it is a boy or a girl." "Ah, Chow." He gripped my hand tightly. "Qingya and I have both shared our lifespans with you. You are now considered half a member of the Fox clan." Xie Yunji wouldn't dare do anything to the Azure Fox family. I was completely stunned, followed immediately by a wave of guilt. In truth, for all this time, I had only viewed these 2 foxes as temporary companions, never intending to grow old and settle down with them. I never imagined they would give themselves so unreservedly